Love is a little bit challenging to talk about just because culturally it's contaminated, meaning that we use that word in all kinds of ways. You use it for your favorite taco place. You use it to describe how you feel about a child. Love. When Paul uses the word love here in the fruit of the Spirit, he has 4 different words to choose from. You've probably heard some version of this before. The word he uses is the word agape, which is the word from the first century for love that we're most familiar with because it's the word the Bible, New Testament, often uses. In that culture, the churches there in the region of Galatia who received this letter, agape wasn't the word they would have typically used for love. So he's using a word that they're familiar with but wouldn't have been part of their common language or experience to elevate what love looks like. To say this is the kind of love that you need to grow in. It's a love that's unconditional. It's a love that is not dependent on someone's worthiness. It's not dependent on someone's performance. It's not contingent upon like criteria or conditions or feelings or emotions. Like our tendency is to define love as, I'll love you because. If you go to Hallmark and you pick out a card, let's say for Valentine's Day, almost every card will be something along the lines of, I love you because you are this way. I love you because of what you do for me or how you've earned it. That's how we tend to think of love. Here's how I would define agape love as it relates to how we love one another. It's loving someone no matter who they are, no matter what they've done, and no matter how you feel. No matter who they are. They might be very different from you. They might have different political persuasion or social convictions. They might have very different backgrounds. They might have a difficult past or challenging baggage that they carry with them. You might not feel loving towards them. Agape love is loving someone no matter who they are, what they've done, no matter how you feel. So how do we grow in that? I think the people who test whether or not we're growing in that kind of love tend to be difficult people, high maintenance people. Like if you think of yourself as a loving person, you can't use your grandma as the test. Like you can't say, well, I know I'm loving because my grandma who makes incredible cinnamon rolls and always tells me nice things, she says I'm loving. I know how much I love her. And that's not the test. Your grandma's not the test. Like who's the test? It's the difficult person. It's when someone hurts you and you pay attention to how you respond. Like, do you go around and you talk badly about them and you let the root of bitterness grow? Or do you love them? It tells you something about where you're at in this process of becoming, or maybe it's a coworker that just is draining and wears you out, or it's a spouse who is demanding and seems impossible to please, or it's a friend who doesn't include you, or it's a mom who's critical, or a dad who's indifferent, or it's in-laws who are dismissive and demeaning. Like these are the people that test how we're growing in agape love. This past week, one of my daughters, her car was rear-ended, and she's fine, everybody's fine, but the car was totaled. And so I spent some time this week trying to help her find a vehicle to replace the one she had. Some things online have changed since the last time I went car shopping, and they have more tools, more gauges, metrics that you can use to help you find the right car for you. And one of the gauges they had online was this low maintenance to high maintenance gauge. And it just took all these vehicles and measured them based on the lowest maintenance and the highest maintenance. It's really, really helpful. I found myself thinking, I wish I could shop for people this way. Like it would be really helpful. Because I mean, one of the things that struck me is the most high maintenance vehicles are some of the most beautiful vehicles. Like they are well designed on the outside and they're high performance and they look great. And if you didn't know better, you'd say, well, I want that vehicle. Surely that is a low maintenance vehicle. It is not a low maintenance vehicle. Like it requires a lot of upkeep and expense, and people are like this. Like sometimes we're drawn to people, we're thinking that's the person. That's the person I want to be around and connect with, and we find out, oh, they're really high maintenance. Like it doesn't take very long to figure out that And then the opposite's true, right? Like some people are really low maintenance, but you wouldn't guess it at the beginning. So you just don't know. I'm just saying it would be nice if people just let you know in advance. Like, hey, I'm Kyle, I'm high maintenance. Like, it would be great if that was just like part of the name tag approach. I read a book some time ago called High Maintenance Relationships. And I read it because I had one of those in my life, and I wanted to figure out how to love that person better. And the author had this list of descriptors or characteristics of high maintenance people. So I'm gonna go through this list rather quickly, but I just want you in your mind, this is a really unhealthy exercise, but it'll lead us somewhere. I want you to identify like who that person is for you. Now don't say their name out loud, and don't point to the person next to you. Like, I get it, we all have those people, but let's just walk through these together. There is the critic, the person who is constantly complaining and pointing out other people's mistakes. And no matter what, there's always something to complain about and mistakes that can be improved on. And there's the martyr. It's the person who is always the victim, always blaming people and circumstances, and they never feel appreciated. And you find yourself when you're with them trying to appease them and apologize. You apologize all the time for everything, and yet they don't ever really do that in return. There's the wet blanket, the person who is pessimistic and automatically negative. Like, they just can't help themselves. Like, I was at this wedding, and we were sitting with some other couples that we know pretty well, and there was one person in that group who's kind of this way. I'm kind of being that way by saying he's that way, but that's okay. Like, he's just automatically negative. And after the wedding, I hear him say, "That was a beautiful wedding." And I'm like, okay, good for you. Like, really good. And then like, he just needed to swallow. He wasn't finished. Yeah, he was just taking a breath. That was a beautiful wedding. I'm surprised the groom didn't try to lose about 10 pounds. I'm like, there it is. Like, I knew it was there. And you have people like they just can't seem to help it. There's the superstar who has to be the center of attention. They love the spotlight. They have to be the center of attention in every room they're in. There's the steamroller who's boldly insensitive to others. So they say things that are, inappropriate, things that are really hurtful, and then they act innocent about it, like it's that person's problem for being hurt. They justify, just the way I am. I'm just a straight shooter. And you're like, well, you're just a something, but there's... The control freak is another one, the person who has to be in charge. There's the backstabber, which is the person who just can't be trusted. They'll not talk to you about whatever problem they have, but they're happy to talk to everyone else about whatever problem they have with you. There's the sponge, constantly in need, but never giving anything back. And when you're around this person, like, you can just feel your emotional energy just leaving your body. Like, it's just draining. I'll add one more to this list. I'll say this, the self-righteous show off. And it's the person, I don't know if you know anybody like this, that goes through an exercise like we just did, and they have no trouble identifying all kinds of people that they do life with who are this way, and it never occurs to them that maybe one of these describe themselves. Like, they never think, well, maybe I'm this way. No, everybody else has some things, but they don't have any. The most difficult high maintenance people are the ones that don't seem to realize that they can be that way too, right? So we have these people in our lives, challenging, difficult people. I've had some, a little bit of fun with this, but I mean, a lot of you could tell some stories that are not fun. Like, they are hurtful, and people who've caused all kinds of damage, and you're really struggling with bitterness and anger that you can't seem to let go of. People who have created messy situations that you've had to clean up, and like, I get it. How do we love those people? How do we grow in love for them? Because they test whether or not this fruit is becoming in our lives. The world's love is based on a feeling, but this kind of love in Galatians 5 is based on a decision. The world's love is based on conditions, but this kind of love is committed. The world's love is selfish. This kind of love is sacrificial. The world's love, and we've talked about this, is tribal, largely tribal and transactional. Like, I'll love you as long as you're in my tribe. I'll love you as long as we see these things the same way, as long as we're on the same page over here. But if you're different from me, if you have different perspectives or views, if you're too different from me, then not only do I not love you, I don't want to have anything to do with you. That's the world's love. Or it's transactional. I'll step over the line and I'll love you as long as you can do something for me, as long as I get something from you. And that is not the kind of love that we're talking about here from Galatians 5. It's a love that's inclusive and generous. The world's love says, if you love me, you will affirm me. Agape love says, I will love you even when I think you're wrong. The world's love says, if you love me, you'll tell me I'm right. And the agape love says, I will love you enough to tell you the truth. World's love says, if you love me, you'll agree with me. Agape love says, I will do something harder. I will love you even when we disagree, or I'll love you enough to disagree with you. And so it's a different kind of love. How do we grow in that? Let's just put that list back up on the screen here. Really, how do we grow in any of these things? As we start the series, I want to especially underline, highlight one big truth that I think has the power to unlock this kind of becoming in your life and in my life, this kind of fruit that all of us want to grow in. And that is that this list is not a list of self-improvement, it's a list of spirit empowerment. Like if you come this next number of weeks and you see this as a self-improvement list, it's gonna be rough. Because what'll happen is we'll talk about joy next week and you'll walk out thinking, okay, I'm gonna be more joyful. Here's my list of things that I need to do. You'll start off saying, be joyful, what's wrong with you? And you'll feel this pressure to be joyful and you won't feel a lot of joy. And then we'll get to peace, but you're still working on joy. Now you've gotta have some peace. And then we'll get to patience, and you've already lost all of that because you're struggling with joy and you have no peace in your life. And it'll just be this exhausting list. It won't work. It's not a self-improvement list, it's a spirit empowerment list. You gotta see it that way. And for many of us, that means getting over this religious approach that we grew up with, that God expects, or what God wants most from you is behavior modification. That you've got to be a good girl and a good boy, and that's what he's gonna bless. And some of you are like, well, yeah, isn't that it? Isn't that why we're all here? Nope. We are here because we recognize we're not good. Only Jesus is good. Yeah. We're here because we recognize we can't do those things. We're sinners, but Jesus, power of the Holy Spirit in us, can bring these things, this fruit in our lives in ways that we just can't do on our own. And I'm convicted about this, even as I listen to sermons about the fruit of the Spirit this last week. I'll tell you that it's hard sometimes to tell the difference between a sermon and a TED Talk when you're talking through some of these things. Like there's something wrong if the preacher starts to sound like, some cross between Tony Robbins and Matt Foley. Like it shouldn't, you like that one? It shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't be that way. It is the fruit of the Spirit, not the fruit of self.